the line, yeah? Kim, can you hear us?
I can. Okay.
Thanks, Kim. All right. It is July 2nd of 2024. This is a Board of Education meeting. It's 7:03. We're going to begin by indicating who's here. We'll begin with Kim as she is online.
Kim Chandler.
Go ahead, Clark.
Clark Nelson.
Karen Winder. Chris Wynn.
Connie Burgess.
Alan Hubbard. Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. We'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. Is there anybody representing our PTA here? Other than Chris? Thank you. GEA, do we have our GEA rep? I don't see Michelle. GAEOP? Nice to have you. And GESPA? Do we have any middle managers? Granite Education Foundation? And I don't see any elected representatives, but please let me know if I'm wrong. Okay. Welcome. We appreciate those of you coming to our July, right before July 4th. We appreciate you guys being here. We're going to go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Kim Babka, who is the principal at South Kearns.
Please stand and repeat the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. For the reverence, I actually get to share tonight. As we get done with school, we talk about graduations and what has gone on in our schools, and we as a board actually looked at kind of a summary of our graduation rates this year, and it's been really interesting to see the different things that schools try as we're trying to increase our graduation rates. And I kind of was pulling on that thread a little bit, trying to figure out, okay, what is it that really makes the improvement? And as I was just reading a few things, I got, I found an article about Robert P. Comer, who is I believe a sociologist, psychologist. Anyway, he works a lot with education and figuring out what is really effective in moving the needle. And I thought it was interesting that he said that it is a holistic approach that they have to take. He talks about some experiences, one experience where he took the bottom, there were 33 schools in this district, and he took the one that was ranked 32 and 33, and he took them from being the lowest ranked schools all the way to the highest ranked. And he didn't change anything other than what their approach was. It wasn't the kids, the socioeconomic, anything different in that respect, but it was just his approach. And he said that his technique is focused on the socially interactive aspects of development so that children learn how to manage themselves in a whole variety of situations and become responsible for managing themselves in a constructive, respectful way. So he talks about there's different things that you need to focus on. He said there's the psycho-emotional development, learning to handle their impulses and to control your own behavior, to handle yourself, your emotions, your feelings. There is an ethical, learning what is right, what is wrong, and living by that. And then there's a linguistic part to it. He said to be able to express yourself in a whole variety of settings and to know what is appropriate, and to be able to receive and listen to others, and to be able to express yourself. And then there's the intellectual cognitive. That is the part of the traditional school that focuses on primarily the intellectual, cognitive, and the linguistic, and it ignores everything else. All of those things, they are ignored. That's why when people experience bad behavior, they call it bad behavior because nobody pays attention to helping the child learn how to handle themselves appropriately. If a child does something that's unacceptable in school, instead of screaming, yelling, scolding, punishing, you talk to the child about what's going on and how to manage that. That is the social, interactive, and so psycho-emotional, sometimes it's ethical, all those pathways in the development of the child are being addressed. And he just said overall, the purpose of school is not just to raise test scores or to give children academic learning. The purpose of the school is to give children an experience that will help them grow and develop in ways that they can be successful in school as well as successful adults. They have to grow in that way that they can take care of themselves, get an education, take care of a family, be responsible citizens of the society and of the community. Now, you don't get that simply by raising test scores. And I think that's important for us to remember. I love that we, in working with parents in this district, we came up with a portrait of a graduate that includes not just our academic learning, while that is our focus. We have 5 other characteristics that we focus on to help kids be able to succeed in life, not just in school academically. And I think that's so important to remember, that we are addressing the whole child as we educate these kids. And that's my reverence for you. We're going to move on to our Good News Minute. Kim, are you ready? As you're online, we can have you go first.
Sure. Can jump in. So, being summer, I just wanted to speak about tonight, like, even though school is out, recognizing how much work continues to go on with a lot of people in our district. A lot of employees are there in the office every day still, and a lot of work is happening, a lot of events are still going on. I have also been busy with family engagements. I haven't been out to a lot of the events this month, but I just want to recognize everything that I have seen going on, the recognition of teachers, of just, the work it never ends, right? Even though it's summer break, we never really truly just stop focusing on kids. So I just wanted to recognize that this month and thank everyone who's out there working hard every day. So thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Connie?
I have been absent from last board meeting, and I don't have anything other than to say thanks to all of you for carrying on and do what you do, and the retreat and everything else that you were able to have while I was gone. Thanks.
I told Chris she could have 2 minutes because she was gone last month and Julie's not here.
So thank you very much, Board President. I just wanted a little extra minute because I wasn't here last month. We all take vacations also sometimes, and that happens. But I just wanted to thank those who participated and made sure our graduations ran so smoothly. I got to attend Cypress, Hunter, Granite Connect, and Granite Transition Services. And every graduation was just perfect for that school. And it takes a lot of people to make sure that happens, and that it's the faculty, it's the staff, it's that leadership in the school, and they just do such a good job to recognize our graduates, and I appreciate their hard work they do. And for Cypress, it was the first time at Maverick Center, and I've heard great comments back, how they really appreciated having it there. So thank you. I just wanted to say, for our board retreat, we did miss you, Connie. We missed you. And it was such a great time to connect, and sometimes we don't get a chance to talk and interact as much with each other as we would like. We see each other a lot, but we don't get to see each other enough, apparently, but it feels that way sometimes. But I do appreciate the work that everyone put into making sure they were at the retreat, and that we had some really great conversations. And it was really nice. And I just want to echo, I have this in my notes that just because it's summer, teachers are not off, staff is not off. We have people still cleaning our schools and in our schools. And here at the district office, we have people working still. And I know a lot of teachers are doing personal development and doing trainings and thinking about next school year and how to make it better. And I think a lot of times there's some misconceptions that teachers only work 9 months out of the year, and it's false. It's very false. And they work year round, just like Kim was stating. And so I appreciate that. I just also want to just put a shout out for the communications department that put together some great opportunities for us as board members to be in the parades. I think Westfest and Taylorsville Days are the first 2 that we've done. And then we have some on the 4th of July coming up, and then some in Kearns. And thank you to that department. Thanks, Andrea and Luke and Trinda and Ben. It's been really fun to have an organized way to see our public, and it was fun to walk with Nicole on Taylorsville Days, and so watch for us in a couple more parades. So that's my minute. Thank you. 2 minutes.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I don't have much to add except for I know our teachers work so hard, and I sure hope you're finding time to do nothing, because it's important to refill your cup. So I hope that with that contract, how it's set up, that you find maybe even just a couple weeks in July to put your feet up before you have to come back on contract time. And we truly appreciate not only our teachers, but everybody who's doing the best at their job. So I just wanted to mention real quick the board retreat. We had an opportunity to meet together last Friday, take a look back on how we've been doing, but also take a look forward on how we want to do. What are our goals as we look at this new strategic plan and work with our administrative team, our top executive leadership on how that's going to look going forward over this next school year. And so a lot of good conversations there as we plan and prepare. And good conversations there. So I appreciate my colleagues and their willingness to have good, open, vulnerable conversations. That's how the work gets done. So.
I'll echo the sentiment that's already been conveyed and just quickly mention as well that the Granite Youth Symphony is off on tour, or took off on tour just last week, all the way up to Seattle. So consistent with this theme that things are never dull and things don't slow down in the summer. That's certainly true for our district-wide orchestra and symphony as well. The other thing I just wanted to convey is there's a lot of transition going on right now, and throughout the summer we have a lot of principals transitioning to new assignments and to new communities and to new schools. And I think as parents we often have a desire to feel like things are the same. But the more that we embrace the opportunity for change and the improvement and the good that can come in recognizing some changes in those contexts, the greater opportunity we have for our kids to really benefit from those changes. And so it's not easy for anybody, including those teachers and principals that are making transitions. It's not easy for parents, but that attitude and willingness to embrace the change makes a significant difference, and I appreciate those that are making every effort to do so. Thanks.
Thanks, Clark. For me, I just echo what people have said as far as the employees that work through the summer. We have a lot of our administrators still in the buildings doing a lot of work right now, and our secretaries getting ready for those kiddos in the fall, so we appreciate them. And also want to recognize there's also teachers who are trying to get those last graduates across the finish line by doing credit recovery during the summer, so thanks for that. Clark already mentioned the Granite Youth Symphony. I have got 2 kiddos on tour with them right now that are traveling back home right as we speak. It has been a fun 4 weeks for them, in spite of what they may think. It was fun for them. And to get up and go to Granite Youth at 7, my daughter's back there scowling, to go at 7:30 in the morning to the orchestra. But I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to get to know other people from other schools and have a good interactive time. And I like, instead of them sleeping their day away, they get up and they get going. So it's a lot of fun. They also had a summer arts camp, which included drama. And they had almost 80 students in that. I was able to go see one of their final productions, and they had several classes so the day was broken up into 2 parts. They went to classes where they learned some elements of drama and theater production, and then they also learned and did an actual production. So I think just overall in the music, they had 350 participants. The drama had almost 80. They had people that still wanted to add. So I just want to acknowledge what a great program that was. Appreciate the investment in that program for those kiddos. It means a lot to them and a lot to parents who appreciate the extra hard work that the teachers do for that. So that is mine, and thanks everybody for your thoughts. We're going to move on to recognitions. I'm going to turn the time over to Ben, and he will take it away.
Thank you, Board President. I'd like to introduce several individuals this evening. We're going to first go through the Regional Teacher of the Year for Latinos in Action. Scott Bell will introduce that recognition. And then Aaron Whitehead will recognize several individual state debate winners. And last but not least, Principal Kim Babka will introduce a special student and recognition. So we'll go to that point.
Good evening. I have the privilege of recognizing Lizzie Anderson, if she could come up. Come on up. Yep. Congratulations. That's awesome. So Lizzie was recognized as the Hunter High Regional LIA Teacher of the Year, and this is a little bit of why she's recognized. She received the Latinos in Action Teacher of the Year Award for the Utah Central Region, which includes both Utah, Idaho, and Oregon. She was nominated and championed for this award by her LIA program manager. She was also elected for the honor because her program has been referred to as the gold standard for LIA, which it really is a great program out there at Hunter High. She is passionate about LIA new teacher retention, so she has mentored many new teachers throughout Granite School District. Some events that she has worked with her LIA program for have included LIA chapter this year has included a pull-out assembly for her LIA students to hear DAVA, or is it DAVA? DAVA marketing team, and then it's also sponsoring the Winter Formal Dance. The royalty for that included was selected to represent Latino excellence at Hunter High, and their community car show that saw over 1,000 guests at their car show, so it was a huge success. She also worked closely with her elementary partners for such occasions as interpretation at SEPs, WIDA test preparation, and science, technology, engineering, art, and math nights. She has also enjoyed piloting several new programs, including a reading program developed in conjunction with the University of Utah, teacher education program, and corporate partnerships facilitated by the United Way. So she's done a great job. Appreciate all her work out there.
Members of the board, Dr. Nye, this was a great year for speech and debate in Granite School District. We had 3 schools placed in the top 5 in state. Cypress took 5th in 5A, Cottonwood took 4th in 4A, and for the 4th straight year, Skyline was a state champion for Class 5A, and we'll recognize them in just a moment. We reached out to 8 individual state champions, 3 in 4A and 5 in 4A, excuse me, 3 in 5A and 5 in 4A, and only one was able to make it this evening. And so we'd like to recognize from Skyline High School, winning state as a junior national extemp, Jeffrey Zoe. Come on up here, Jeffrey. And Jeffrey will be returning for his senior season. We'd also like to recognize the overall team captain on this state championship team, Valencia McCarthy. Valencia competed in Lincoln Douglas, and she will be attending Howard University this upcoming fall. And then we'd like to also recognize Coach Timothy Henry, the coach of the state champion Skyline Eagles.
to Noelle is like having my own personal coach. She congratulated me for wearing a dress. All right. Hector, you want to come up, bud? This is Hector and Laura. We had a really amazing thing happen. So, look at all these cool people. Hello. Okay. One day after school, Grandma came into my office and she said, hey, we had something happen out, she said, I need to let you know that one of your safety patrol people saved a child's life. And I was like, pardon me? What did you say? And so the day before, she witnessed him being out on safety patrol, and he was at the crosswalk, had his flag out. There were 2 children getting ready to cross. They started to proceed into the crosswalk. He noticed a truck that came barreling, accelerating through the crosswalk. So he grabbed this little girl's backpack, pulled her back, and yelled, stop, waving his flag at the patron. From there, we collected statements, and then our safety patrol advisor nominated him for a AAA award, and he got a state and regional recognition for the AAA Lifesaver, Safety Patrol Lifesaver Award. And then from there, it's taken on like wildfire, and KSL came out and got statements and took pictures of him and the whole 9 yards. But the most humbling part to the story is that he's downplayed all of it. Number one, didn't come in and say, Mrs. Babka, I just saved somebody's life. Do you need to tell the school? He didn't say a word. And then when he's interviewed, he simply says, I did what was right. And that goes along with the entire family. Mom comes in and volunteers. I mean, these are what our communities are made of people that are doing their best 100% of the time. So congratulations.
Thank you. That concludes our recognitions. You are welcome to stick around or take, I've been given orders to take Lizzie to ice cream. We didn't recognize, however, hey, is it Hector? Hector, tell us who's with you. Tell us who your family is. We just brought it. Thanks for being here to support him, and we appreciate everything that you did. I apologize, we didn't get the other ones that recognized. But we appreciate you all being here. All right, we have, as far as I know, no elected officials here, but we do have a patron participation. Amy Call has signed up to participate. Amy, if you'll come up to the microphone, please state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes for your remarks.
Thank you for that introduction. My name is Amy Call. I live at 3651 Terrace Heights Circle, Mill Creek, Utah. First, I wanted to say thank you to the board for your time this evening and for your service to the community. I have 3 minutes, so I will not be able to speak much further on anything other than why I'm specifically here, which is to speak about special education services. I've spoken with a coalition of parents in the special education community within the Granite School District, and many parents are unclear as to the specifics on the diplomas being offered, as well as transition services available due to changes that were made by the state within the last few years. There's no parent grandfathering in of these changes either from my perspective or some of the other parents I've spoken to that I'm aware of. Maybe there was, and I'm just not aware of it, but I do know some parents who still think that they qualify for post-high, or their students qualify for post-high. So, I mean, there's some confusion out there. Questions that have come up for me, as well as some of the parents I associate with, include the level and intensity of instruction necessary to accelerate learning, and how the district determines if a student demonstrates a risk for academic regression. What diploma or continued services do students receive if their reading, writing, and/or math skills are below what would be considered a typical grade level based on standard objective measurements? Who would qualify for GT score, formerly post-high, versus GTSA? I think it would be helpful for there to be specific definitions, criteria, rationales, and clear expectations on the level of instruction provided with these programs. I have attended webinars from the Utah Parent Center with district personnel, and I appreciate those, but the parents that I associate with, and myself included, still have questions, and maybe it is my own misunderstanding of the information. I'm not sure if it's accurate or not, so that's why I have some more questions that I'm seeking clarification on, and I've written them up. I won't be able to go through them all right now, but I have them written up, and I was going to email them to my representative. But I think it would be helpful to have answers to these questions so that families can make more informed educational decisions for their children. My speaking time is limited, and I can't, as I said, I can't go through all of my questions, but I will email my board rep, Julie Jackson, and I can email the President McDermott and about these questions on about diplomas and transition services, and I'll follow up with my representative on the answers. Since I'm often told that my concerns are state issues and the district has to abide by state requirements, I plan to contact my state representatives with the intention of having a dialogue with each of them to speak about how decisions made at the state level impact actual students. Thank you for your time.
Mrs. Call.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much. Assistant Superintendent Bell, if you don't mind talking with her for just a moment, getting your contact information, we'll be sure to follow up with you on your on that feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We are going to move on to our consent items. Again, we've had these items for a while. If there's no questions or anything, I will entertain a motion for that.
I'll motion to accept the consent agenda items.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. Is there any further discussion? All right. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. I'm sorry, Kim, did we hear you for sure?
I said aye.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. Also, we're going to stall for just a minute because Leslie's next up. We're going to move on. Our next agenda item is trauma-informed behaviors and practices. And actually, Scott's here. We'll invite you up, Scott. I think Leslie's helping you out with it, but thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing this.
Wherever you want. And then do I just start? Okay. All right. We'll have to come in. Thanks.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for inviting Scott Bell and I tonight to speak about trauma-informed practices and behaviors. Let me flip to my notes, sorry. I apologize. I'm getting contact information out in the hall. So today, we're going to outline what trauma is and then how trauma affects students and what behaviors manifest themselves in school, as well as what practices we deploy as workers in the school, as classroom teachers, as well as support personnel. So I brought my expert with me, right here, Scott Bell, tonight, and he's going to go into the presentation, and then I'll wrap up with the timeline of professional development that's happening this year centered around this topic.
All right. Great. Good evening. I'm Scott Bell, the Director of College Career Readiness. I probably should have said that earlier when I was doing the other recognition, but as was mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about trauma-informed practices and how obviously it's very important that students feel safe at school and able to learn. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as I share some things with you this evening. First of all, what is trauma? Trauma is an emotional response to a distressing event. And all of us will experience traumatic events throughout in the course of our lives. However, we won't respond in the same ways. There's many factors that go into how we might respond to trauma. It might be, one is the severity, but also our other life experiences would contribute to how we respond to trauma. However, one thing that we want to be aware of as we work with our students in our school district is that students in poverty are more likely to experience an increased number of traumatic events. They can be more prevalent. So trauma-informed practices. One, trauma-informed practices address supports and strengths for all students, and so it addresses that school-wide and for all of our students that we have in our school district. Also helps to establish a safe learning environment. As I mentioned earlier, that safety piece is very important for students to be able to learn. They need to feel safe and have a safe environment to do so. Also recognize the impact that trauma has on learning and the effects it will have for our students. Some of those effects are illustrated here where we talk about some of the effects that trauma can have on the brain. In the center part of our brain is that limbic system, and in there you might have heard the terms such as fight or flight or freeze. And so what that is, just a little bit of explanation on that, is that when we interpret our environment as dangerous, we have a response of what we should do about it, and that usually looks like fight, flight, or freeze. Some of the ways that can present itself, oftentimes when somebody's in fight, they're not going to start swinging or being physical. That can happen, but oftentimes it's more like being angry, yelling, things of that nature, or flight or freeze, looking like a student shutting down. And there's a few examples on this slide of what trauma can look like in a classroom, such as being quick to anger, difficulty with relationships, zoning out, not participating. Also hyper-emotional, meaning either when they're really happy, they're super happy, or when they're upset, they're super upset, just kind of really hyper-emotional, and as well as all or nothing. That could look like for a student, it might look like a student that is taking a quiz, getting one question wrong and starting to have a tantrum and getting very upset because they didn't get it all right. That'd be kind of that all or nothing. Those are some examples of what that could look like in a classroom. And something to be aware of, students with 3 or more significant traumatic events, some factors or some things that can be, or some risk factors can be that they can be 3 times as likely to experience academic failure, which may lead to student dropout, 6 times more likely to have behavior challenges, and 5 times more likely to have attendance problems. And these all being significant things that we want to help students avoid those challenges, and those are some of those challenges that can be affiliated with trauma. So what do we do? As a school, I wanted to show this slide briefly to kind of give the context of the lens that we look at addressing this from different, what we refer to as tiers. And so I'll give a little bit more detail, but as a snapshot, these tiers that we look at our educational services at is first that tier 1 is that it should meet, that tier 1 addresses to everybody, and approximately 80% to 90%. Tier 2 being around 15%, and tier 3, and I'll go into more details on that, but just so you kind of have the overall view with that triangle there. And this applies both academically and behaviorally. However, in this context, I'm going to focus on the behavior side of things, are how we address the needs of our students and the supports for our students in those 3 areas. So tier 1 supports, as I mentioned before, are for all students. So that would look like things that are school-wide. So that could be classroom structures for the whole classroom, procedures, school-wide expectations, school-wide reinforcements, or reinforcers such as a positive reinforcements, things of that nature. Those that are done school-wide would be a tier 1, and in that area of tier 1. And so people that provide the tier 1 supports are pretty much the whole school. It includes our school administration, includes classroom teachers, our staff, as well as parent involvement, PTSA involvement as well. And so that would be in that area. And it can look like building strong teacher, building, and some of these things that it looks like, especially specific towards trauma-informed practices, includes helping teachers develop skills in student relationship building and maintaining those strong relationships, creating an emotionally safe learning environment, so awareness of what elements should be in place to help with that environment, as well as teaching students, teaching self-regulation skills, self-awareness of when they're maxing out or when experiencing stresses or some of those things, and how to manage or regulate those emotions in more beneficial, appropriate ways and helpful ways that help them to stay in that learning path. Also teaching teachers some self-awareness, their own self-awareness of their experience and being able to be in a good place as they help and assist our students. Tier 2, as I mentioned, is small group. Provided typically by our school administration, classroom teachers, social workers, school counselors, especially in our secondary, behavioral assistants, and other personnel, along with collaboration with family. Some systems that are in place that in this tier 2 of supports would include also our teacher grade level teams or professional learning communities. What that could look like from a tier 2 standpoint might look like teachers talking about some students that need help with, for example, social skill development, and we might get a group of students that would go through, that would have some social skills in a group setting. That small group piece is what's significant or a significant detail about tier 2. Remember, tier 1 being all students, and then tier 2 more targeted to a group, and then tier 3 being individualized. Now, tier 3 is usually trying to address that 1 to 5% that, so there's the supports that are school-wide, tier 1, and for students that need additional support, we look at that tier 2 level of support, and then that 1 to 5% that might still not be responding or needing additional service or help, then we're looking at that tier 3 level. That's at an individual level. A system that is usually provided through, I guess I'd say, is through our school support team. That school support team is typically made up of school administration, school counselors in the secondary, as well as school social workers, school psychologists. It can also involve our district, our board certified behavior analysts that we have in my department to help with consultation, collaboration with families, to help address and look at ways that we can do interventions to help students that are needing that additional support at an individualized level. Some of those interventions can look like, can also include possible 504 accommodations or special ed services, in addition to other individualized services that can be provided in that area of that tier. I might speak just a little bit as we talk about this. The trauma-informed practices that we're discussing and that we are utilizing in our district, we've been sharing those with all of our administrators in our MTSS boot camps throughout the summer, and Leslie will speak a little bit more about the timeline.
Okay, as Scott said, this summer we've been giving administrator professional development in a boot camp setting. Trauma-informed practices is the topic of study, and we go more in depth of the presentation that Scott just showed you, as well as we've had some special education training that also surrounds this topic of trauma-informed instruction. We're seeing a lot of kids and a lot of behavior surface in our schools, and what we're finding is it's due to the fact that they've had trauma events in their lives and they aren't able to self-regulate. And so how do we make teachers and principals aware that this is happening, and then what types of things do we do to kind of break down what the cause of this behavior is, so then we can adjust our behavior in order to help the student make appropriate choices, and then teach them how to self-regulate these emotions. So that's what we've done in Administrator Boot Camp. In the fall, we surveyed teachers. In the spring, Rick Anthony surveyed teachers on behavior topics that they'd like to see. Once we established like the top, I think 6 or 7 topics, we surveyed teachers again and said, okay, which ones are you interested in? Out of these, we've narrowed them a little bit. What are you interested in? And we'll be having professional development in the fall, one on a district-wide level, and trauma-informed behavior and practices will be included in that short list, as well as there'll be a principal-conducted, district-supported day where a principal gives professional development on behavior in the fall. And then we'll continue throughout the school year this theme of behavior at our monthly principal professional learning that we have, focusing on the teacher standards of the learning environment. And a lot of the learning environment standards hold a lot of these practices in them as well. So I just wanted to make you aware, like next year's a theme for behavior. And we started boot camp in the fall. We're gonna hit teachers really hard in the fall, and then we're gonna do principal professional learning. And a lot of these topics, as we give it to the principals, is then incorporated into different trainings within the school in order to keep what principals have learned, give these ongoing professional development to teachers as well. Just as situations come up, it's gonna be at the forefront of our mind, and we're really focusing on behavior next year. So I wanted to make you aware of that. All right, do you have any questions?
I probably should add that we benefit by having one of our assistant principals, Dan Harmsberger, out at Jefferson. He's kind of a resident expert, as he did a lot of his dissertation work on this subject. So we've utilized his resources and knowledge on this quite a bit.
So I asked for this topic to be presented just because the board, as we went to the Granite Education Foundation, Connie, I know you were absent, but I think you've seen what they do before. We've seen, first of all, that we have students across our district who are in need. We saw that on that big board. And we are getting more and more students in our district that are in need in many ways. It may not be socioeconomic, but I know we've had students who have come in because of they're fleeing a country and they have had traumatic experiences happen. And we are seeing and hearing of increases in behavior problems in our schools. And this is one way that we need to address it. I think as a teacher, it's helpful for me to understand that. It was helpful for me to learn about these trauma, become trauma informed, because I can approach a student who has had trauma a little differently than I expect, a kid who may not have had as much trauma. So it's important. It also has to do with, we have budget items that we use to spend on some of these things. The MTSS, these multi-tiered supports that we have. And as we increase in these students who have this trauma, I feel it's important for us as a board to understand that so that we can know what we're spending it on and why we're spending that money, because it is important. It's important for our teachers to know, it's important for our principals to know, and it's important for us to understand that. So that is why I asked for this to be presented. So with that, do you have any comments or questions?
I just want to say thanks. I think as students are in the classroom that they can be taught, but the adults surrounding the children, whether at school or at home, also have to be taught how to handle them. So I really appreciate you focusing on that and helping teachers to understand and know steps or know whatever they need to know to help these children. It's very worthwhile. Thank you very much for making that a priority.
Clark, did you have something? Kim, did you have anything?
Yeah, real quick, thanks for asking. I wanted to ask, or just kind of get some feedback on why, those kids who've been in traumatic situations aside, why do we feel that we need to basically assume that all kids need trauma intervention? I'm concerned a little bit that state-funded, state-driven efforts to assume responsibility for this kind of thing inevitably leads to parents surrendering their responsibilities for their children to the state and its agents. And The parent-child connection is the most powerful mental health intervention that we know. And so I want to, stay away from intervening in that. And again, just looking at the, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, why do we assume that all kids need some kind of intervention for trauma? Why are we focusing on those who actually have experience?
Thank you. I would probably respond to that question, the first part of the question that you asked of the assumption that all students may have experienced trauma. I think I'd like to clarify that I don't think that our trauma-informed practices are operating on an assumption that all students have, that we're needing to intercede or intervene to address trauma for all kids. The things that are in that tier 1 area are more to ensure an environment. The tier 1 or for all students, I would suggest, are more things that all students would benefit from, such as strong student relationships is something that all students benefit from, an emotionally safe learning environment for all students to be able to thrive in, including students who have experienced trauma or are impacted by trauma. So I guess my first part, my response would be to say that those are designed there to provide an environment that all students would benefit from, including those who may have been impacted by trauma. And I would certainly agree that the importance of our parents and our families and involved with it are certainly the key piece for our students' successes.
You do refer to it, at least in the image of the pyramid, as interventions, and that's why I'm asking that question, right? Not just a good environment as a baseline, but referring to it as interventions, even for tier 1. So I want to make sure we're clear on that point. So thank you for your explanation.
Yeah, and Kim, if I could add something, we don't intervene without parents' knowledge, ever. So we are partners with parents, and as things manifest themselves and we have concerns, phone calls are made home to parents, and before we start any type of intervention at all, we, intense intervention like tier 2, or once we go to small group, honestly, we step in and the parents are there right with us, and we don't do anything without parental permission.
Thanks, Leslie.
Can I just make a comment also? I mean, I don't know if this is appropriate, but some of these parents also have trauma. And so when they're dealing with their own trauma, it's very hard for them to also turn around and deal with what's happening with their student and their student behavior. So I think some parents are actually very grateful for these services because they're probably in trauma themselves many times, maybe not all the time, but they might have some traumas that they're dealing with also. And I think, like Leslie said, they ask parents permission, and I feel like a lot of our parents are very grateful that someone is watching out for their kids also, not just them with their maybe coming from another country. And just a side note, I've met some kids that are here without their parents. We have some high school kids who have come without parents. So we have to be very aware that there's not always two parents or even some are living with an aunt or uncle or a grandparent. So I feel like not all students fit in the same mold. And we have to be aware that there's kids that maybe they need an extra support system.
Yeah, and let me clarify, not parents, guardians.
Thank you.
Well, I feel like too, as just having seen this in a classroom, it's helpful for all students to understand expectations and when we're talking about tier 1 supports, these are supporting all of our students and helping all of them so that if there is ever an incident or a problem or a situation, then they're better prepared also to handle, to say, okay, I will step away. We talk about how to handle certain situations, and instead of making the problem worse, our tier 1 supports teach them, okay, this is how you handle it, and to walk away or to step away or go get an adult or whatever it is, and to make sure that you have a trusted adult, a parent or a guardian or somebody that you can share with. So I think it's valuable whether they are trauma kids, for all students to have these. It's kind of, as I shared that in the reverence, that it's a multi-layered approach. We have to teach the whole child. We can't just teach one little part of them in order for them to be successful. So Any further thoughts or questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, appreciate this opportunity to review the Graduate of Granite, our strategic plan with you as we head into this next school year. How do we continue to build on what has been our foundational strategic plan for at least a couple of years? And like all good strategic plans should, we've outlined some very specific efforts and even resource allocation to those priorities. And as we learn, as we grow in the different action steps and the priorities, we make adjustments. So a strategic plan isn't static, and so there's just a few changes, some things that remain the same, and so I'll just provide a brief overview as to what that looks like for us moving forward. Probably the biggest piece here, and certainly what gives us direction as your staff, is your vision and mission, which collectively becomes ours. And it's through this work that I know the board has been very engaged in and in refining, and how do you capture the essence of a school district in just a handful of sentences. And so, but this, even though it is just a few sentences, it really does guide the work that we do in our district as your staff. And so, Graduate of Granite, at the end of the day, what does the Granite School District offer to families? What do we offer to children when it comes to providing them a high quality education? At the end of the day, we like to see them through graduation, and as going back to the board's vision and mission in that space is what does it look like for lifelong success? And so our role in helping students and families achieve lifelong success can be captured in what our value proposition is how well they're prepared for life after they leave us. And so I don't know, I had to put this in here. So I visit the schools, and what was so cute, the kindergarten that I visited here, they had heard that I was coming, and they wanted to show me their Graduate of Granite t-shirts. Now, if you look closely, and we send t-shirts to every kindergarten student coming to the Granite School District. This particular t-shirt, if you look closely, it says Class of 2036. So even in that space as kindergartners, we want to see them graduating. Now, that concept might be lost on them. What does that look like, when they're 17 and 18 years old? However, we want it top of mind and in the forefront, not only of the child, but of the parents. When they go home, they're wearing this shirt, they're seeing themselves accomplishing that purpose, is to be graduates. And parenthetically, 2036 is when I might think about or start thinking about retirement. So to see the kids come in with that t-shirt was pretty surreal. So appreciate them. As has been mentioned, academics is our top priority. However, there's, in working with different families and our district community council, identify these 5 other areas or these characteristics, and we've talked a little bit in study sessions as to what these look like. And these, as you can imagine, as we prioritized this, and what does it mean for a child not only to be academically proficient, but what does it mean in terms of qualities of hard work and resilience, communication, dependability, respect, and responsibility? What does that look like for a child? And a lot of schools have done this a little differently, but you know what? It's okay. We'll make this work. There's a picture that I was going to include in here that's on a different slide deck that didn't make it into this one, but that's okay. We'll make this work. What I was going to show you is schools have done this a little bit differently, but they ask their kids, they ask the students, it says, what does hard work and resilience mean to you? That's the one. And this one particular school took the picture of the child and made a poster with their face on it and their definition beneath it. And one of my favorites under hard work and resilience is a young man had answered his 3rd, 4th grade. And it's on this poster hanging in the halls of the school, and they ask different students to do this. And so in the halls, they see themselves. But he essentially said, hard work is when I want to give up, but I don't. And I keep giving my all and keep working hard, something to that effect. But the resonance there is, how are students owning this, and how do they see themselves in these characteristics is being key. So our strategic plan, how do we accomplish all things academics and our characteristics? Well, a good strategic plan should have priorities, objectives, and actions. And so what have we identified as our priorities is that graduation rate and proficiency for starters. And then we have objectives as to what are those metrics or those measurable goals. And then if those were to occur absent actions, they really just become the pretty vinyl letters that end up on the wall and really mean nothing to anyone. And so actions define what we do when we say what our priorities are and what our objectives are. And then we can measure. And that's sometimes you've heard us refer to as an academic ROI. What is the AROI? Meaning we're investing these resources after this effort, what is the return? And when you're thinking about that, it just helps us make informed decisions based on how we do that. So strategic impact. Graduation, first and foremost, and the goal stated by 2027, 83% are above graduation. As of this upcoming year, over the last 3 years, we've grown about 4%, and projected in that graduation we should top 80%, if not 81+%, which would be phenomenal, and as you can see, the highest in the Granite School District at any point in our history, recent history, at least per the federal 4-year cohort that was introduced some years ago, 2009, 2010. And while we're thinking about graduation, we have to also increase what does it mean for preparedness when you're graduating, and that's where that advanced coursework comes in. In 2021, that would say that 70% of our seniors had access to and success in either AP, concurrent enrollment, current technical education, or the International Baccalaureate program, IB. Fast forward to 2023, we're at 77%. So if you think about that, 77% of our graduating seniors have had rigorous coursework and have been successful in it by that measure. And so we do anticipate for 2024, again, some of these are lagging indicators. We're still waiting for some of these data, but that will have also increased. Again, graduating and the value proposition behind the diploma. So quickly, as far as our objectives, so proficiency and graduation are our priorities, our objectives, literacy, math, and competency-based learning. Now, within each of these, there are those associated action steps. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read each of these. You have these to view and have questions, but they're all found in our document, our strategic plan document. And while they're bulleted here, you can go and see kind of a narrative of explanation behind that. And the same thing for math, and the same thing for personalized competency-based learning. I do, before I get into that, when we think about proficiency and moving the needle on proficiency, we have to think about all of our students and perhaps some of what they're experiencing. And in the Granite School District, we have 20,101 students who are learning English at some point, whether they're coming to us in kindergarten or they're in high school. But we have 20,101 students, which is about 34% of our population. And so one of our strategic efforts is to say, how well are we providing English language development services for our multilingual learners? And so this last year especially, we took the data from the previous year and we really identified what does that look like in terms of meeting their needs. And through a combination of resource allocation, through a combination including some of the software and progress monitoring, some of the English language development services, the professional learning, the multilingual PLCs, we have a lot of reasons to celebrate. The blue is this last year. And if you take a look in grades 9 through 12, those investments have paid off and are paying off. We haven't arrived, we still have more work to do, but a trend in the right direction. And even grades K through 8, again, a significant increase from last year and outpacing the statewide average in the number of our English language learners meeting their targets. WIDA is the English language assessment, if you will. And so a couple things to break down that data a little bit more, right? So if academic proficiency is one of our keys, how are we meeting our significant student population? Of course, we look to meet all of our students' needs, but this one specifically I wanted to point out. And so once again, you see increases. That area in grades kinder through 5, that speaking, after talking with some of the principals, looking at their individual data, what's noticed is what do we need to do next year? Well, first of all, build on listening and reading and writing, but speaking, we need to give more opportunities for our students to respond, more opportunities to speak. And there's specific strategies that we'll incorporate in that. Grades 6 through 12, look at the blue. If you take a look at that, this again, intentional investment of resources around meeting students' needs. And if you see that, we really have made a statistically significant difference in the outcomes for our students who are learning English for the first time. Every category, reading, writing, speaking, listening, and composite. The composite or the overall as compared to previous years. Quickly, Bonneville Junior. Highlight them. Again, look at the blue. So we've got a great representation here. And so if you take a look at that, I know they were very strategic. They identified, well, what is it that we need to do to serve our students learning English a little bit better? And through very intentional efforts, and I could have them come up and they would love to specify all the ways that they've done this. But to take a look at that, my goodness, some significant results helping students achieve proficiency academically by helping them gain English. Granite Park Junior, significant outcomes and benefits for our students. Oakwood Elementary, significant. I could keep going. I had Cypress High here.
Superintendent, what network is that, all those 3 schools from?
Which network? So there's representation from all networks, I should point that out, but that happens to be the Cottonwood Network.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. I did have one in here, and we'll share these data. I just wanted to give you a glimpse, right? How are our strategic investments paying off, and how are our students being served? I just use this as one example. The strategic plan takes into account the needs of all of our students. Given the number of, 34% of our students also are learning English, I thought it would be just to point to one specific effort where strategic planning and investments have paid off. Okay, and we'll share that. I did have a Cypress one high in here, and anyway, it's on another page, but we'll get you all that information. Social skills and dispositions priority, right? So if we have academics, then we have social skills and dispositions. We talked a little bit about the tiered interventions and supports. What does it look like to have a system in place to address? And we talked a little bit about trauma-informed behaviors, but behaviors in general. What level of a system do we have put in place? And so we have the tiered fidelity inventory, which is a walkthrough tool to determine what do those intervention supports look like. Our goal going into this year was 70%. We hope to reach 70% of that implementation. Celebration, we're at 74%, which is significant. Again, trending in the right way. And then, of course, the benchmarks of quality, measuring very similar efforts with 3 prioritized actions. I just wanted to point out Graduate of Granite and PBIS. So this is Taylorsville, go T-ville High School. And so here is just an example in their hall. They have communication. You see the 5 aspects, but then you see aspects of PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports beneath that. So what does communication look like, sound like? Dependability, hard work, and resilience, respect, responsibility. You get the idea. But here's a school that's making very visual the components of what do these what do these characteristics mean, and then what does it look like in terms of action and sound like. Attendance under social skills and dispositions priorities, we continue to have a challenge with students attending school. That's not only a Granite unique challenge, but a statewide and national challenge for that matter. And so every school within their continuing improvement plan, and we've talked a little bit about that, almost every school has some aspect of strategy and intervention and action steps with engaging parents to make sure that we're getting our kids in schools, because when they are in school, we're obviously able to serve them better, and they're able to reach their academic goals as they would want for themselves as we would want for them. And another measure is having 100% of our teachers take attendance daily for every class period by the end of next year.
Is that 100% every day?
Every day. And it becomes a safety concern too. Sometimes when we don't have attendance being taken and someone, you get the idea. So yes, to the.
What's the chance of that actually happening?
Oh, we're pretty close-ish.
Okay. Just wondering.
We
Not that I'm one of those teachers that doesn't take attendance. I never want you to think that.
would not ever.
Right, Steve?
Right, and for us too, as we're thinking about this, is the fidelity of the data. And so one aspect is to be able to determine whether, or the consistent attendance of students is whether or not on our end we're consistently taking their attendance. And so just to emphasize that. Sense of belonging, this piece has been adjusted for this next year, so we got have some baseline data from last year. But per 53G4402 subsection 1E, the Board of Education for local education agencies shall establish an early warning system, and as specified in state code. And so as you're thinking about an early warning system, this area of student voice, academics, behavior, and attendance, and that's where this comes into play, right? So we're meeting, on the one hand, the language in state statute, and on the other, we have a vehicle now to be able to determine what an early warning system looked like. And a piece of that early warning system is whether or not students feel like they belong in our schools. And when students feel that way, their attendance is better, their grades are better, their behaviors are better when they feel like school is somewhere they want to be. And it's a warm, safe environment. Those are, again, actions associated with sense of belonging. Again, that panorama piece is, again, that early warning system answer to state code. Third priority, talent development, right? We need to take care of those that take care of our kids and take care of the business of the district. This is a celebration also. So recruitment and retention. We want to recruit the best, we want to retain the best. So our goal is 85% of non-retiring licensed granted educators will be retained. 92%. We have a retention rate this year of 92%, which is phenomenal and worthy of celebration. Again, we have to take care of those that are taking care of our students, whether they're in front of the students in the classroom or they're providing educator support services or administrative services. We need to take care of those that take care of the system of public education. And so for 92% is phenomenal. Again, a second measure, 95% of educators, associate educators, will receive their license within the first 3 years of hire. And again, we're at 94%. We are almost there. And then the last one, the goal was 95% of all contract positions will be filled by the beginning of the year. And again, we are almost there with 94% this last year and hope to build on last year's success for this year. And those prioritized actions is what the District Improvement Steering Committee, DISC, is able to review and say, were our actions successful or were they not? How do we know? And then we get to work. Professional learning and evaluation. Again, this is our PG&E, professional learning, professional growth evaluation. In other words, how are we challenging ourselves and how do we hold one another accountable for our growth? Because our growth, in turn, is beneficial for children. And then just to build off the school continuous improvement plans, and the board, and this is where these become important. So while these represent overarching district efforts and priorities, every school is unique in its own way. And so the continual improvement plan that each school identifies what their priorities are as they fall under achievement, social skills or proficiency academics, right? Social skills, dispositions, and talent development. And then what does their data say should be their priorities and what actions will they align to those priorities for the next school year. And the board has the opportunity, of course, to approve the continual improvement plans moving forward. And that is what what I personally use in my site visits is having the discussion as to how well those are working, how do we know, and what adjustments perhaps or obstacles do we need to consider that are in the way of them being able to achieve the goals that they've identified for themselves.
And just kind of as an update on that, we will be able to see those. We were gonna hopefully see them this month, but you're thinking more September that they'll have them, or?
I would say August.
August. So board look for that. You can check in on your schools and see what their school and continuous improvement plans are.
Yep, they'd be happy to share those. And for the public's acknowledge, once the board approves those are for public consumption, which is very, very helpful when a community where a school resides takes a look at that, sees what the priorities of the schools are, and is able to align their efforts around what the school needs as defined by those. And then I talked a little bit about those, but that's the work of the District Improvement Steering Committee DISC that we're working on even right now as we tee up what looks like next year and what becomes an even more forward-facing, guiding action and strategic alignment of effort moving forward. And that is the Graduate of Granite in a nutshell, in less than 10 minutes.
Not 2, but 10. Are there any comments, questions? Kim, did you have anything?
No, okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Nye. Appreciate it. All right, next up we have the Population Analysis Committee is going to talk about our boundary study update. And we have this as an action item as far as their recommendation for us.
Should we just go with that? Okay. Board President, thanks. Board, Superintendent, and all others joining us online and other places. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to represent the Population Analysis Committee and again to speak about the 3500 South Corridor study. My name is Steve Hogan. I'm the Director of Planning and Boundaries. And again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Let's jump in. The agenda, as you can see quickly, that's our study. I'll quickly review the process. By the way, I will go over a lot of these slides very quickly. As most of you know, the board is very familiar with this process and many of these slides, and kudos to them for being very active throughout this process. Therefore, I can go through these quickly. As always, stop me as needed. But I have these in here largely for those that aren't familiar and those that are watching or come back and look at this later. So then a quick overview, our outreach efforts, our DLI task force, Redwood Area Subcommittee, and then finally, of course, our recommendations. Again, process. All I'll say about our process is that it's almost a year-long calendar year. We are in the middle of that process. You can see there we are to the point of what we think is a critical point every year of a paring down and narrowing our focus on certain schools. So that's where we're at. A reminder, the map with the green box showing the approximate area that we're looking at, and I've said the word approximate from the very beginning, just to remind people that these are the schools listed, and sometimes when a ripple effect or a domino effect happens with closures or other changes, other schools on that periphery can be affected, and as soon as we anticipate that happening, we do reach out to those schools as we have in the past. Nothing new there. Why? Why are we here talking about this area? Again, what we know is, of course, low enrollment in multiple schools in the area. DLI. Many of those schools along the corridor are quite frankly struggling with that combination of having DLI, Spanish DLI, and a lower enrollment. And then, of course, reconfiguration that has been approved, and that takes effect about a year from now, and that has some impacts in the area. Therefore, we thought it'd be a good idea to study the area. These are just the schools listed. You've seen this before. This is a table that we've used from the beginning, that it has the FCI scores, the name of the school, most of the special programs that are at each school. And one key note there, again, a reminder that you can see I have highlighted in red, and that is these are the numbers, the enrollment numbers K-5. Some were already K-5, but since we're talking a year from now, we thought it would be good to go ahead and work with those numbers as they will be. Some of our outreach efforts. I don't have enough slides probably to list all the things that Ben and I have done, so these are some of the highlights you can see there, starting with literally the board approval, which was a public meeting, city council meetings, network community council meetings, large meetings, Spanish-only meetings, surveys, mailers, efforts on all of our social media platforms to reach out to our different patronages. And so I think we've done a pretty good job overall. Nothing's perfect. We're always willing to get better there, but a pretty good job of trying to reach out. The unique challenges sometimes require additional resources. I knew from the beginning, or at least had a strong suspicion, I've been doing this long enough, as I looked at this study, that this would be maybe more complex than some people anticipated. And it's proving to be that and more even. So as we started to look at not just low enrollment, but some of the special programming challenges that we've discussed from the beginning, like DLI, we thought we needed more in-depth information, background, data to help the PAC make a good recommendation. So remember the PAC, as it's made up of over 30, really all of the directors and then some throughout that represent every area of the district. We took some key people that had critical information and asked them to create a task force to study DLI and some of these challenges that we're looking at. So I'll go over that in just a moment with a few slides. The other unique challenge that we realized after looking at the map and some of the data is what we just started calling the Redwood area, and we created the Redwood area subcommittee. And that was made up largely of Aaron Wilson and some of our data people to help us understand some of the nuances and challenges of that area, not just Redwood Elementary, but the area overall. We thought, you know what, this deserves a closer look. Let's look at those. So let me go over those two quickly. First, the map. As I said, this is just the same green box, the same map, but with those circled are our DLI Spanish schools in the area. The task force, they were charged with the DLI School-Based Programs Task Force was asked to consider options for addressing issues surrounding declining enrollment in schools along the 3500 South Corridor that currently house DLI programs, DLI Spanish. After considering possible options, the committee was tasked with making recommendations that could be presented to the PAC, and they have done that. A two-part challenge, if you will, is again solving the DLI issue in this area, and then at the same time in conjunction with evaluating the enrollment that comes with those DLI challenges, and even perhaps after we have made some decisions on DLI. Some of the data that we collected, again, far from comprehensive, but some of the things that we were working with is survey data from administrators and parents, school enrollment data with the forecast that look at, combined schools, some of the DLI only data, the walking maps, open enrollment, school boundary maps, where students are coming from, all of these things and much more that we asked them to take a look at. So having said that, the PAC is considering the following options, and I just parenthetically said either as a standalone or maybe in combination. I'll take this chance to say as a reminder that to everyone listening that this is a narrowing down, or another way to say this perhaps is a decision to continue studying. No decision is made tonight, but this really is a decision to continue to study certain areas in more detail, in more focus. So keep that in mind as we go through these. First, I think rather than option really was a conclusion that the task force, and I think the PAC would recommend at this point with those 5. So again, looking at those 5 schools, Granger Elementary is a viable school with DLI and is not included in any of the consolidation options. So in other words, we're more or less taking Granger Elementary off of the table for the following options. They're doing well. We feel like why try to fix something that's not broken? And after looking at that and looking at many options, that's our recommendation at this point, is to take Granger really off the table and let them remain as is regarding DLI. Now, they could see some other impacts if there were some other changes. So again, that map. So option one. Option one really takes the other 4 schools down to 2, with Valley Crest and Monroe being one pair on one end, kind of the more western end, and Hillsdale and Stansbury a little further east on 3100 South. And one of each of those pair not have a DLI and combine with that other school. So in other words, either Valley Crest or Monroe have a DLI, or Stansbury, one of Stansbury or Hillsdale have a DLI program. That's in essence what we're saying. Also, that begins in, again, 25, 26, so a year from now, and that's not a phase-out program. It's an immediate decision with all of those students being obviously free to go to that new school. I see some mics getting ready, so.
I just have a quick question. When you say from 4 schools to 2, you're talking about the DLI program or the actual school?
That's a great clarification. We're talking just DLI.
I was about to.
Unless there's some, thank you, because that would have caused a lot of calls and upset people tonight. So we're talking just DLI at this point. So again, discontinue the DLI program at either, maybe I should just read this directly and that would help. So discontinue the DLI program at either Valley Crest Monroe or Hillsdale Stansbury, beginning in the 25-26 school year, and offer placement in the DLI program in the other school for students who want to continue. So that is option one. This next option is perhaps a little more aggressive and creative, and that is simply creating a designated DLI magnet school. Using one of those 4 schools that we've been discussing as a Spanish DLI magnet school, and discontinue DLI in the other 3 schools beginning in 25-26. Every current student in the designated DLI school would be offered enrollment, of course, in DLI. So one option, option 1, goes from 4 to 2. Option 2 goes from 4 to 1. But obviously the biggest difference is that school is DLI students only. Now, we have, this DLI task force has reached out and looked at other programs around the state, and there are 1.5 similar programs. There's not a perfect comparison. There's no other district our size. There are a lot of different ways to do this. There are still a lot of unanswered questions about what that would look like and how that would just look going forward. But at least we thought it was worth a little further look-see as we, while we're here looking at deal options, let's consider it. Let's look at it. We've been asked by principals, administrators, parents about this option, and we're learning at an accelerated pace, trying to understand this option and make sure we consider as many of the unintended consequences as we possibly can. Any questions on this part so far? We can always come back. But
I have one just really quick question. If you take the population of all the DLI participating, what enrollment would that school be if it indeed became a magnet school? Like,
I'm going to give you the estimate.
Just an estimate.
You bet. The estimate is over, if all current DLI students in that area were to attend one school, I think we'd be close to 600. Now, that's all. And we don't think that would happen. However, the other side of that coin is we believe that we could attract more students or a different group of students if it were DLI only, and perhaps even one of the things we're curious and even excited about is the opportunity to compete with some of the other schools, the charter schools in that area. And we think this may give us the opportunity to do that. Did I say something wrong or did I misspell something? Okay.
No, you did not.
Okay. We're
just acknowledging that Superintendent and I is a regular guy.
That's all. Okay.
It was just the timing of
tried to be discreet.
opening his can, and it was the loudest thing ever, and you're in this serious conversation, and
So
I just can't look at
apologize,
Nicole.
but my can made a little, yeah.
Okay,
My
thank you.
apologies.
I'm just glad it wasn't me, so.
And apparently I'm a junior high teacher.
So.
Can I speak to that really quick, too? You probably are aware, we did some survey work with our families who are participating in these 4 schools. And the top 3 schools, the other 3 schools beyond, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. The furthest west one.
The Valley Crest?
Yes. The other 3, it was roughly 80 to 90% of those families indicated they would not leave to go to another school to participate. That they were only participating in the program because it was available in their school. So that is, to his point, would we get all 600 of those kids? Probably not. It's probably closer to the 300-400 range.
That being said, I'm pretty familiar with this area because I grew up here. But, I mean, you're talking Valley Crest is 5,600 west, Stansbury's 2,700 west, Hillsdale's just off of 32, Monroe's just off of 44. And it literally is all along 3100 south.
Right.
So the opportunity to not have, if families chose to move under this option, I'm not saying I'm supporting that option, but just, it's not very far. You're talking blocks.
Excellent point, and something
away.
we've discussed many times. And when we talked about mileage, in fact, our maps, the maps that I mentioned a few minutes ago, talk about just that. Okay, how far apart are these schools? And the nice thing is, it's down one street. It's on the same street, really. So
It literally is a straight shot.
helps a lot.
So to your point, it's a lot of oversaturation in the area as these schools have all declined in population just as the area matures. So Valley Crest data indicated that would probably have the highest amount of families who would want to participate. And that's obviously the furthest west, so that's why we would want to continue studying that as a potential option.
Okay, so I'm going to pivot now. We'll come back to this in just a moment with the recommendations, but I want to pivot now to our next, really, part of the Redwood Area Subcommittee. And I want to start with this, because this next one has been complex, difficult, and is a true test of our pack with all of the great, strong, intelligent personalities in the room and us challenging each other and trying to understand what we're trying to accomplish. And I wanted to convey this is really more of I think a joint statement besides quote, an exact quote. But basically it's this. The overarching goal of our population analysis studies is to recommend changes that improve opportunities, resources, and outcomes for our students. I think that's generally what we're trying to achieve, right? Now, we have other considerations. We're aware of FCI scores and safety and walking routes and enrollment challenges and all of those other things. But bottom line is what we're trying to do is improve educational outcomes. And so, and even understanding that, this one was difficult because let me go through some of the reasons why. As we looked at this, and I called this, again, the Redwood Area Subcommittee, or their report, this is what we've noticed over and over, and that is based on Utah school accountability measures, Redwood's performance has remained consistently low. Now, I'm going to go back to a second. Well, I won't go back, but if you refer back to that table for just a minute, you'll see Redwood's population is not small. In fact, it is currently about where we want schools. They're around 525 now, and in fact, they could even be a little larger than that with some new developments opening. I won't be surprised if they're around 550 this fall. So some people have looked at that and said, well, isn't that why we're studying these? And admittedly, it is oftentimes the trigger for us to look at schools and consider closures and other solutions. But I will also say that we have said for years now that it is not the only thing we consider. It's one of the factors, a big one, but not the only one. And so I think this is an example of that, where we're taking a look at what's happening more than just enrollment. Two quick slides. will deserve at some point a longer discussion perhaps, but 2 quick slides to illustrate our point. Comparison, and by the way, these slides were courtesy of largely Joan Bramble and Aaron Wilson's department, but comparison of how smaller schools in Granite District performed, or excuse me, similar schools, and that area. So those schools around, which were Granger Elementary, Redwood, Stansbury, and Woodrow Wilson, were the schools that we asked them to identify. What did they look like in comparison with somewhat similar demographics and socioeconomics and other factors that we identified? You can see there that 2 schools are almost at the exact same spot at about 45%. And again, these are accountability points. The other one at 42, and then there's a significant gap down to 30% where Redwood is. Now, this is not, the point here is this is not new data. This is not current or not just a snapshot data. This has, quite frankly, at least the last 10 years, if not 15 years or more of data. And that's why it was important that the PAC, different people in the PAC brought it up and said, you know, that there's numbers there, but let's talk about more than that, more than the numbers. The second slide is simply comparing Redwood to other Title I schools in the state. And if you look at that line on the bottom, it says in 2023, Redwood was 325 out of 328 of Title I schools, or 99.1% Title I rankings in the chart. Redwood is consistently ranked in that bottom 5%. All of these challenges are, none of them are simple. They're all complicated. There are a lot of reasons here. I can tell you we've had some very good administrators there. We've had some very good teachers. And we are efforting our best to understand the complexities of the community and what's happening. But we do know that the academic performance has been less than what we would like, kind of going back to the superintendent's graduate of Granite and some of that data. What do we do? And so this is the challenge that we've had as a PAC, looking at this area differently, I would admit, than we have a lot of our studies in the past.
I would just point out, as Steve and I were discussing this presentation, that one of the first schools we closed in this, I don't know if this decade or generation, this cycle of school closures was based on academic reasons. And truth be told, with respect to this, as PAC has discussed this, if this trend continues and we're unable to, despite the efforts being made by the staff and the principal and supports being provided by the district, within the next 2 years, they're eligible for state takeover and a recommended closure, I should say. And we know that the state doesn't really take over schools and run schools. And so that's why this is kind of came to the forefront as PAC's conversations continued.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about, so, I mean, I don't know if it's still called turnaround, but the turnaround, I know Redwood has been on that for a while. I know we have a fantastic principal there right now, so the principal has been replaced recently. What other measures have been taken as far as, because I know there's certain things that have happened. Has the staff been turned over as well? What has happened with that school so far?
So that would be what we affectionately call the Nerd-Welburn turnaround model, to bring in a new administrator and
disruption model.
Yes, a major disruption and bring in an entirely new staff. That is probably the lone piece that we have not addressed on this particular school or intervention that we've tried.
Okay, but everything else has been.
I don't recall him speaking to this, so I hope I'm not restating something, but we had a subcommittee chaired by Aaron Wilson in PAC kind of go through all this data and provide some analysis for us before we came to this conclusion. And that was part of that discussion. I think it'd be more appropriate to have Aaron come and answer that question, to go and discuss specific interventions that have taken place and supports that have been provided there.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to say, I remember when they were in turnaround and I was board chair, the state board invited us to come, and I think, Ben, you were with me, to come and answer some tough questions on, why isn't Redwood getting out of turnaround? Why are their scores so low? And prior, knowing that, I actually went and talked to some of the teachers there, talked to the principal, had a great conversation. And I want to just make sure people know we have good people in that building, working hard, doing their best. And one of the things that really stuck out to me as I was talking to the teachers, because there was one year where Redwood had a turnover of like 80% of their teachers. I mean, it was incredibly high, and I don't know how anybody gets the ground underneath their feet as a principal if 80% of your faculty is turning over. And so in talking to some of them, it was fascinating to me that they said, you know what, these are some, we spoke earlier this evening of trauma-induced events, and it was fascinating that the teachers say, you know what, as a district, you ask us to go and make these connections with kids, and then we're supposed to we hear some pretty traumatic things. We hear some pretty sad stories. And then some of us can leave it at the door and go home to our own families and not carry that emotional burden. But there are many who can't separate that. And so the reason they're requesting a transfer isn't because they don't like the school, it's because they love the kids so much. It's just hard for them to separate work and personal life. And so those are the kind of people we do have working at Redwood. They care about kids. And I also explained, it's hard when you're looking at data like this because you assume you're testing the same kids in the same cohort, but Redwood has such a turnover of kids and families that you're not really testing the same kids from year to year because there's so much movement.
I'd say, Karen, that's one of the key factors that we found so far is that mobility of that turnover is significant.
Exactly. And so those are the two things that I wanted to help the state board recognize as they're looking at charts like this. It's easy to find fault. But there's stories behind those numbers.
There are definitely some outsized impacts within the community itself that are impacting some of our efforts, right? You mentioned high transiency rates, some of the highest mobility rates in the state, or in this particular area and region. I had our police chief pull some additional data points in terms of issues or crimes that we see happening that aren't related to the school but are impacting our school operations, and consistently Redwood is impacted by crime happening in the area, and it kind of gives you a sense of some of the other challenges you've mentioned, trauma that our students might be facing in this particular area.
I guess that's why oh, sorry, Kim. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to echo what Karen had just said, and also kind of add to that just with a question, like how are we accounting for those known facts as we look at this data? So I want to make sure we are. I think if we would speak to the principal there, I mean, as I've spoken to her, one of the issues that they have faced is the instability in administration that they have felt has been very negative for the school and has made it hard to turn around, right? Teacher turnover, transient nature of that school population, like all of those things are factors in this number, just like Karen said, and it can be almost deceiving in a way to look at these charts and not realize the background. So I just want to, can you explain a little more how we are accounting for all of that as we're looking at this?
Great question. And in fact, thanks, Kim, for chiming in. And Katrina are you still back there? Katrina's still back there. And we appreciate her efforts. And she's here because she cares. And I called her earlier to talk. She says, well, I'm planning to be there anyway. So yes, a couple of things. Kim, you mentioned administrative turnover. And that's largely my understanding is with assistants and interns, new ones every year. It's hard to get momentum when those kind of changes happen. I would always caution when you're looking at charts or data of any sort. I won't repeat it completely, but there's great quotes from Mark Twain about statistics and data, and yeah, they can be spun or they can be used, and snapshots are one thing, but it's what's behind the data. It's the complexities and nuances of what makes up a community in a school, the teacher turnover, staff turnover, or other things, so many things. But again, that goes to why I think this landed on our recommendation list, is to say, we don't have all the answers yet. Let's continue to study this. Let's dig a little deeper.
I think that's a key point here is at this point in time, we're not making any final recommendations. We're just asking for permission to narrow the scope of the study and to study this a little bit further so we can understand those pieces. I do want to compliment the community. We held a Spanish-speaking meeting to talk about this study, and Katrina, what do we have, 35 families there, parents there who deeply care about their community and their school. They love their school community, but there are some other challenges and difficulties that we want to understand a little bit better, which is why we're recommending this continue as part of the study.
So let's get to the main event, the slide, the recommendations. Now, we've covered a couple of things. There's one or two things on this slide that we haven't, so it'll jump out right at the beginning. So PAC recommendation, schools that remain under study. Closure study.
I'm sorry, Steve. Can you go back really quick? I just want to emphasize something that I think is really important before we get to that recommendation. If you consider, again, the final recommendation as we continue to study this and we gain more information and understanding of the circumstances may not be closure. I'm just stating that for whoever's listening or paying attention to this meeting. It is for us to continue to study and better understand the problems and what other resources or interventions could be provided in terms of assisting this community and the school. That being said, when we did close Ochre Hills, we did track those kids, and they did better in their neighboring schools. Is that stand a reason that would happen here in this case? No, we don't know that. And so that is why we do want to continue to study this. Is closure the best option? We don't know that. That's why we want to continue studying that.
We hope to reveal more data, information as we go forward, if the board approves that recommendation. Now, we haven't even talked yet much about Orchard this go around. However, it's a recommendation first on the list. It is there. The reason perhaps we haven't talked much about it this year is it was on last year's study initially, and it was talked about. It's been on our radar for a while, and you can see in a little smaller font there, but initial considerations so far, in other words, low enrollment, the combination of the location, that can be good or bad, but the location, the FCI is unfortunately really low there, and walking routes. So some of the more typical things that we see in our studies are evident at Orchard Elementary. So it remains, again, no decision, but we recommend that it remain on our study list to continue looking at. Redwood, which we've been discussing, the long-term school accountability measures, that mobility that we've discussed. FCI is also on the lower end, or the not great end, if you will, at about a 10 out of 100, and lowest, the 10, 1 being worst. So it is a factor there also. Now, the other subgroup I have down there, of course, you can see the DLI/closure study, and I want to be very careful but specific here why I listed it that way. It really is first the DLI study, the DLI task force, the options that we've talked about. If, however, there could be one or two options included in that could be a key to looking closer at a study for one of these schools if there are certain options, if we take advantage of certain options. I don't know what that looks like yet. I just was hesitant to take closure completely off of the table until we know for sure which option is chosen for the DLI programs.
This is just strictly for state requirements to make sure that we're complying with state law. If we decided to make a recommendation like that, want to keep all of our options on the table, although that, as he's indicated, is not the focus of the study.
at least. And again, as we go forward, in fact, Ben and I have next week, we set up meetings for our big community meetings and our small community meetings that we'll get going again as soon as school gets back in, and we'll have, I'm sure, some good feedback and more data to help us support these decisions. So, and of course, as always, other schools may see boundary adjustments as closure decisions are determined. There would be some ripple effect and impact, as there is almost always, where other schools have to adjust based on one school. So I would anticipate that. And we'll have a better idea of that early fall, hopefully by September, in our next round of conversations with schools. So really that is it in a nutshell. More questions, comments?
I just want to, I know you're going to look at this as a pack, and you guys will make sure that you do your due diligence, but my concern with Redwood, I echo what Kim and Karen have said, that, you know, that school has a very specific reason why it's there, and it's not the fault of the community or the people, the staff there.
Agree, wholeheartedly.
But that also is a center to that community, and taking that away can very highly impact a community that is highly in need of that. So before we look at closing that and that being the solution, having a school that's walkable for that community is very, very important. And I hope that we consider that as we're moving forward on this.
Has been and will continue to be. Great point, though.
That being said, Nicole, I think if we have kids at a failing school, it's a little bit of a disservice. And if there's options to pursue where maybe through other boundary adjustments, they can have a little bit better opportunity, I equally think that needs to be part of the consideration as well.
Absolutely. I don't disagree. I hope we're exhausting all of our options, and that's not just...
You're just echoing the same conversations we've had in PAC.
Yeah.
It's that.
Yeah.
And I worry because it's almost an island right there where, you know, and how far will they have to go to school at Redwood? It's, you know, west, yeah, they're not too far away, and yet it's not the safest route, you know, if they go west, and same with east. So, yeah, I worry about that.
Again, many factors. It's on the northern end of our district boundary. There's a lot of commercial, industrial in the area. Full disclosure, we're well aware, Connie and you and I have talked about this before, and that is there are 3 decent-sized charter schools in the area. We're aware of that. Very. I've been to each one of them. And so, by the way, I will say also, just so everyone knows that even though Julie is not here and couldn't be with us online, that I visited with Julie yesterday in person, and we went over this same stuff, so she has all of this information and is aware of the same conversation we're having tonight.
Yeah, I just have I just want a similar, there's a similar situation
Almost
at
the same.
Orchard where it's very landlocked in a way, because there are very busy streets around there too. I just want to make sure, I know PAC's aware, but that's a walking community right now. And so I'd love to see it continue to be a walking community somehow. And there's not bridges, there's not a lot of good crossings. And so that's just my also worries with Orchard.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions, if I may. Number 1, is there data that you already have, or could it be requested in terms of the mobility rates of those 3 charter schools that are there in the Redwood Elementary?
Man, I would love to have
boundary?
that kind of information. I'll just say it's difficult to get information from charters. I've been working with people at the state trying to get that information as recently as a couple of weeks ago. Perhaps there's a way, and and we can make some more phone calls, but it's very difficult.
I would point out that despite those charters being in the area, does not mean that they're pulling students from that area. And if I recall from our last data dump this last May, where we updated the mobility rates, as far as we're able to track, and the only way we have the ability to track is somebody comes to the school, disenrolls and says, I'm going to a charter, and then the secretary puts that into what's now Focus. It's a very small amount of our students from that particular location leaving to go to a charter.
Sure. Typically, there's a report that we can access that tells us how many of our Granite District students are attending a charter school, and oftentimes which one. But that seems to be more and more difficult.
Yeah, it was a broad question in terms of understanding the demographic of the neighborhood and the industrial nature of the neighborhood and some of the things that have been described thus far. So just trying to continually understand that better. My other question reverts back to the DLA magnet possibility. I recognize that you mentioned there'd be 600 if every student effectively transitioned to that magnet school, but that's probably not likely based on some survey data. And obviously it's all speculation at this point. But my question is from your research on this magnet idea, it's an idea that's been presented many times and never really entertained before. If I don't characterize that correctly, please correct me.
I think generally that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. So my question is has there been any indication of what a sufficient number of students would be? If it's not 600 is a robust elementary school potentially,
right.
But it's not really large. It's kind of middle of the road in our paradigm currently. So what would a magnet DLI elementary have to get to in terms of a student body to even further entertain the possibility?
I'll take a brief shot at this and add if you want to. Our early indications are we believe that it would not need to be necessarily as large as our other goal of 550. When you only have one program and the emphasis is on the one program for all students, it eliminates many of those what we used to call small school concerns. Everyone's in the same program doing the same thing. So it does help. And I could come up with a slide to go over which ones and why. But that's part of the challenge is we don't have an exact apples to apples comparison to look at that. But that's my conversation with Sherry Sorensen, our DLI director, and some principals in the area, because I asked the exact same thing. What are we doing here? Are we just doing more of the same? And I liked their answer initially as to why it could look different than that.
I would point out, and I'm looking at Steve to nod or say no or yes, but it seems like some of the primary concerns from our elementary slids as we had this discussion is that some of those small school concerns in terms of ability to PLC and collaborate would still exist if you had a smaller population. Now, it would not need to be 600 plus like we need a robust DLI school to be to meet the state standard and the best practice for the program as outlined by the state and initially has been adopted. But that being said, if you're at 400 students, you're going to be experiencing the same challenges that any other normal traditional school would be experiencing. I would point out that our subcommittee, and I'm looking at you to confirm this if I recall correctly, studied this as an option and recommended it for further study because it's what the principals in that area in those 4 schools requested. They specifically asked if we could look at that as an option. And so really at this point in time, our primary concern is to take that out, not concern, our desire is to take that out to the community to see what kind of additional interest there is in that type of a program because it's new to us, right? It's outside of the box. It's would it attract additional open enrollment students to that particular location? And particularly, would it be attractive if that was, the Valley Crest Language Academy, pulling back some of those students from those other charter schools who are not educating them as well as we know we could, then that's what we want to kind of analyze and study further, if that makes sense.
It does, and I realize there's much research to do, and that's kind of the place in the path where we are currently. But I'm curious right now, given that you're only aware of 1 or 1.5, which means there's some partiality going on out there, perhaps 1 to 1.5 other schools in the state that have taken on a DLI magnet approach. Do we know why? It's always been very very much declined, if you will, to be part of the discussion previously. So again, I'm kind of trying to pull on that thread a little bit, to use a Rich Nye phrase.
I don't know if it's simply a matter of demographics and the uniqueness of some of our demographics and our Spanish-speaking population, perhaps. But I can try to get some more firm data on you for why. Sherry Sorensen would be my contact for that. She's the one that's reached out and could answer that.
Understood.
I do recall anecdotally part of that conversation. Again, most districts are trying to follow the state model as part of that program, and they've been reluctant to try other things. And we are one of the few districts with a declining population, and so their DLI programs are not experiencing, by and large, very few, I should say, because we are aware of other DLI programs that are starting to see some of the issues, but they are single digits as opposed to their problem is probably comparable statewide that ours is within our district, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for indulging the questions.
If I may offer a point of view, would
Sure.
that be okay? When we staff dual enrollment classrooms, we put a significant amount of students in the lower grades so that we deal for attrition. So one thing to think about is, as we lose students, there may not be students with enough Spanish language to enter the school. So you might have a lot of kids leaving the school and perhaps not filling those spots with students who are fluent in Spanish in order to participate at an academic level in the classroom.
I was just thinking, these are public schools we're talking about, not charters. Is there DLI charter schools or not? I'm not sure.
I'm not aware.
Okay.
If there is, I'm just not aware of it.
Yeah.
Isn't that part of the challenge too, though, that within a boundary, if a student moves into a boundary of a school, legally we have to take them, and if they move in and they're not a DLI student, I think that's why we've shied away from it in the past. This is an interesting situation because we have 4 schools that are very, very close to each other, and it could hypothetically work where we do make one of those a magnet program and just solely a DLI school because it is such a close population. It would be a dual boundary then, or a I guess we'd have to make it a non-boundary school, correct? We'd have to make that DLI magnet basically an open boundary school, and then that boundary would then become either Hills or Valley Crest or Hillsdale or whatever one we use. That will then be. Am I looking at that the right way?
We would use the term school of choice, and you are correct in the assumption that one would become more open enrollment school of choice, and then we would have to do boundary configurations to constitute a boundary school.
So that goes then to the heart of why we want to study all these options a little bit further, because we did hear those from the community members as looking at a DLI magnet as well beyond the principals. So we do want to keep a lot of options open going into the fall. And that's why we also keep the closure on the side of this, because if we did choose to pursue or recommend based on the feedback we get from the community, a magnet option, then we'd really want to see how that impacted and how all those dominoes fell before we looked at potential closures in that area further, if that makes sense.
And a point of clarification, Esperanza is a DLI charter.
I knew it was one of them. I couldn't remember which one.
Which is in that area.
Yeah.
That's why.
Very close.
At least according to their website.
Okay. All right, this is an action item. The action would be to support the continuation of the PAC recommendation that they study these schools further. So I will entertain a motion for that.
I move that we accept, is that what we're doing? Accepting the recommendation to continue the studies of these things.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, our next item on the agenda is an action item on the Evolved Weapons Detection System. Because this is of a sensitive nature, we had the bulk of our discussion during our closed session. You have a couple slides to share with us, but it is an action item, and I think we're all clear on what the action is.
Well, good evening, Board. Thank you very much. This is a quick continuation on discussions of the security pilot program at Hunter, and the slides are more of a summary of the thinking that went into some of our privileged conversations on deployment of security. And so what we can summarize is that we presented some data in that prior setting that points to some of the successes of a weapons detection system and points to some of its deterrence capabilities. We readily acknowledge that we also have areas of improvement as to how it was deployed. And again, a pilot program is just intended to do that, to understand strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. And so we identified some personnel issues, some training issues, and some technology adjustments should we wish to continue funding the pilot program for another year. We want to continue at all schools to develop additional security layers as part of that comprehensive security process. And we have to continually evaluate the efficacy of those improvements. And so again, this is part of Granite District's approach to security, but also reflective of HB 84 as they look to direct from the state security at all schools throughout our district and the state as a whole. And so what we do want to do is, and I should not have written the term evolve, it doesn't relate to the product. We want to grow our security measures and complete our plans as we work to implement HB 84. That's important, and this is just a part of that. So at this stage, based upon conversations, we think it's appropriate to continue the pilot in the 24-25 school year. We want to test the existing technology and alternate technologies. Again, pilot programs benchmark other technologies off of each other, all in an attempt to make sure that we're doing what we can for the security of our staff and students. We do know that we need to modify some staffing and training based upon last year's tests and evaluations and observations of the system and the personnel. We want to create systems and processes to aid in continuity of implementation. So having a goal, you get to attain something once. Having a system, I get to replicate the good things time after time. So we have to develop a system, and we also have to look for ways to replicate the best practices at other locations. HB 84 will push us towards security at all schools. This gives us a chance to work towards that. And of course, we want to increase the data set and refine that analytical data that we presented to you to help guide future decisions. So we think it's appropriate at this point in time to continue the pilot program, to look towards one-time money once again to fund this, and to look at staffing, training, and technology as part of this and benchmark against others.
Any questions?
I move to continue the security pilot using the systems available to the district.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion?
Just want to add a comment before we vote. if that's
Go ahead.
okay. Just want to comment for public awareness that I do have some reservations personally just about the long-term viability of this option, but do want to see results from some modifications we're making on this pilot. So we'll vote in favor of this continuation today. Just want to make that public on the record.
Thanks, Kim. I think most of us feel that way. So with that, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Right, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we are going to move on to our first reading. We have Article 10A6, Learning Materials. Is Doug joining us? Oh, you're Doug?
I will
Nye.
represent Doug as he, again, is out of town. So I'm happy to cover this. So as Ben is pulling this up, this particular board policy, there's some adjustments made to be in keeping with lines of code that were changed this last legislative session in 53G 10-103 as the sensitive materials statute, and essentially has identified or provided more guidance, I will say that, an expectation to LEAs regarding how sensitive materials is to be defined. And it comes down to two categories, and that one is the objective sensitive materials, and that's defined in, again, code 7610-1227, and then subjective, which is defined in 7610, 1201, 1203, and parts of 1227. And so what this does is make clear as to what our procedures are and how they are to be defined in the instructional resources that we use. And just mirrors, if you will, the lines of state code that govern the same. And so last thought on this, I just want to make also clear, while this last legislative session gave some very specifics in terms of even procedure and in definition, even previous to the sensitive materials statutes, anytime that it was discovered that we might have some material that was in question, that we did have a policy and a procedure as to how to evaluate and make a determination based on whether or not it was appropriate and or at grade level appropriateness. And so what this policy does, once again, is just brings into line the expectation that's been set forth in state statute.
Are there any questions? Okay.
I move that we approve Article 10A6, Learning Materials, as a first reading.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve Article 10A6, Learning Materials, as a first reading. Is there any discussion, further discussion on this? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Just want to make, did we get you, Kim?
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay, thanks. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We will move on to the next. Let's go back.
Yep. So Article 8A2034, excuse me, dual language immersion and other school-based programs. What this policy does, and we've had some good discussion about this, and part of the previous discussion in terms of the PAC study also is incorporated here. But the Board of Education having that responsibility for the education of the students in this district, certain schools will adopt various programs. And what this policy does is identify if it is appropriate that a program be evaluated, a school-based program like DLI be evaluated, and there's a list of other programs, although not an exhaustive list, that perhaps is struggling in enrollment. Maybe there's some budgetary constraints. Maybe, you know, the various scenarios where what this would require is, or allow the board to do is to stand up a committee, evaluate the program, go through the pros and cons, and that committee would serve as an advisory role and provide recommendations to the board. And it gives some direction as to what a committee would consist of, and being able to determine whether or not a program was meeting its intended objectives and or otherwise perhaps wasn't meeting the needs of students and families as the program intended.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, is this, do you foresee this committee functioning ultimately at each DLI school? Or would it be much broader than that it would be one committee for representing the entire district and all of its DLI programs?
Yeah, I think the board would reserve the right in terms of what the scope or the scale of that committee would need to be given the question at hand. And so I would imagine a scenario where, let's say 4 schools were running a school-based program and one informed the other, that it would start with a much broader committee to identify that, but then work down into the individual schools to make additional determinations. And in that space, there would need to be representation from each of those schools in terms of what potential action or recommendations will be made to the board.
Just clarifying question. So this is a district-based committee but it would include specifics to the programs that it's trying to, like, for the DLI program, it would be school-specific added to that committee. So it'd be a committee district-run. Yep. Schools would add in as needed.
Yep, district facilitated.
Thank
yep,
you.
If you want to think it that way, the district would facilitate that work with various stakeholders at the school level.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for this.
I was going to do this before, so technically we should do the motion before the discussion, I realized, but that's okay. I move that we approve Article 8A34, dual language immersion and other school-based programs as a second and final reading.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve Article 8A34, dual language immersion and other school-based programs as a second and final reading. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And finally, we have Article 5C12.
Yeah, I would just, if I may.
Go ahead.
I would recommend that this particular policy go back to the Law and Policy Committee so we can evaluate further the fiscal manual, their fiscal policy, if you will, that's also approved by the board for an alignment, not only with the policy, but with the administrative memo. There's some cleanup work there that I think we can do to polish that, make that better, and bring it back.
Do we have to do that by action, or how do we do that?
We can just, yeah, you can either pass over it or we can make it as an action item just to move it back to law and policy.
I move we move it back to law and policy for additional cleanup efforts and bring it back at a future date.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move this policy, Article 5C12, school support organizations, back to law and policy for additional cleanup. Well, any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
All right. Superintendent, you're up. Do you want to stay there or here? It's totally up to you. Come on up.
Thank you, Madam President. Just want to take a moment to appreciate the work of the board and the retreat that we had. As has been mentioned by Board Member Chandler, there's a lot of work going on still in our schools, in our district, and so as we gear up for this next year, identifying what those priorities are and the resources needed to welcome students back is ongoing efforts. And so as we continue with summer graduations, as has been mentioned. I know our high schools are working with students on content recovery for those students that might need a little extra time. And we look forward to not only for our seniors being able to graduate this graduating class, even some students up until September 30th. We're also working, and it should be noted, for students in 9th, 10th, 11th grade who may have needed a little extra help to the summer. That content recovery is still ongoing. So the work of the summer is still very, very, very engaged, and appreciate the work that's going on to make sure, one, that we're taking care of our students from this last year, and as also we're gearing up for welcoming them back in just a few short weeks. So with that concludes my report.
Connie, would you like to go first?
The Parks and Recreation Division has a new director. His last name is Otis, and they're going, and we still need to get more and more people with the county rec pass. And Taylorsville Pool should be open by now. So other than that, I don't have anything to report.
I don't have anything for Budget Committee. We are not meeting in July, or we are meeting in July.
I'll try to
We're meeting in August, so we'll have more to report in August.
I was going to try to mask my disappointment, but
I know.
it probably came
I'm
out.
so disappointed too. More meetings in July. So thank you, Todd, for getting us on track in August. Thanks.
I don't have anything to report.
Must be July. I do not have anything further requiring a report.
Kim, do you have anything?
Nope, same here, since we have not had district community council the last couple of months. I do not have anything.
Okay. And as far as law and policy, we will be meeting in 2 weeks. So we will have an update for you next month. And I do want to just remind board members, I noticed that we did get our vector training in our inboxes, so please take the time to do that. That helps us. We go through the same training as the teachers, specifically because we work with kids and are in schools, I guess not work directly, but so please make sure that you pay attention to those.
Do we have just certain ones? Do we have to go through all of them?
Well, whichever ones are sent, Joe goes through those and sends out. There are certain things required by the state, so I will be waiting until I do mine through my job because some of them overlap. All right. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Sorry. My apologies.
So
a
close.
Motion to reconvene for our executive session.
I move that we reconvene our executive session for the
Karen.
purpose of character and competence.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to reconvene our executive session for the purpose of character and competence. This is a roll call vote. Kim, we'll start with you.
Kim Chandler, yes.
Connie Burgess, yes.
Chris, yes.
Karen Wonder, yes.
Clark Nelson, yes.
Nicole McDermott, yes. All right, we're going to take just a brief recess and excuse everyone except for Todd